Welcome back to Fearless Journeys Thriving on Campus. I'm Corinne Jansen, and this is my co-host, Steve Johnson.
Hey, everybody. It's wonderful being here, and we're really looking at some wonderful things together. What's our topic today, Corinne?
Our topic today is family dysfunction over the holidays.
Oh, that's definitely important, right? How many dysfunctional families are there? I know mine is sometimes.
Well, I mean, doesn't all families have some little dysfunction sometimes?
Definitely. And, you know, families are often portrayed like that time of joy and togetherness, but a lot of students struggle with family dysfunction. So, you know, it brings up stress, old conflicts, mental health challenges. You know, you go back to your parents and you start to feel like you're 13 again, and it's just something.
Yeah. So we have a guest with us today to help us talk about family dysfunction. Welcome, Maya. Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Maya Ichikawa, and I'm a mental health therapist at Wellness Services at Lethbridge Polytechnic. And I've been around for a few months now at this position.
Yeah, great addition to Wellness Services, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's just get right into it. So why do you think family gatherings tend to bring out old issues, or even for people who, you know, don't experience them from day to day?
Well, many students are returning home where they haven't been for a while. So oftentimes automatically returning to that physical environment and being face-to-face with family members can make those forgotten concerns come flooding back. Or if students do see their families on a regular basis throughout the year, sometimes holiday gatherings that involve extended family friends, can be stressful for a lot of reasons. One may be that the last time issues came up, it was the last time everyone got together. So what has occurred in previous years could be anticipated to repeat or be brought up in some way, and the holidays may have negative connotations for some students because of this.
Yeah, it's like, you know, there's this big fight between siblings, and it kind of got left aside, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're back in the same
right
place.
It's right there again.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a real pain. Oh, not going to talk about my sister. You know? But it's kind of like sometimes those kinds of arguments and stuff really affect your own mental health because of, you know, you got that increased stress level, and anxiety starts building up again, right?
That's right.
Our next question for you, Maya. Why do you think some students feel additional pressure around holidays to maintain a certain image or play a particular role within their family?
Well, roles in families can become very ingrained and embedded in the fabric of the family's world. Even if roles don't fit anymore or have never fit, those expectations can remain, whether they're told outright, suggested, or assumed. The pressure can be felt. And it's also pressure on self that develops from this, and it's easy to fall into the role because this is what's familiar and recognized. And maintaining a certain image may avoid conflict, disappointment, rejection. So a student may return home with new experiences and outlooks that are currently reshaping their identity. And maybe there's an increase in recognition of what fits for them, what doesn't fit for them from their family's lifestyle. But oftentimes the family expectation is that everything continue as before. Or family members may struggle adapting to this change in the student.
Do you find that possibly there would be an increase in pressure from your own self-image kind of thing, other than the family's image of you? Do you think one would be stronger than another?
I don't know. It's hard to say what would be stronger, but for sure you make a good point that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, a lot of expectations on ourselves. And a lot of that can be rooted in the family expectations, or they can be new created expectations that emerge.
Like you said, we're all creating ourselves differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a response from a student in their own experience of recognizing some family dysfunction.
Well, literally this past weekend, let's see, my dad's not a big communicator, And so and also from when I was young, I always recognized his tone as being angry. So then we decided to clean out our garage this weekend, and he's using his stern voice. So I thought he was mad at me, even though he was just trying to get stuff done. And so I misinterpreted that, and then that kind of blew up into something more.
And here's a couple of quotes that we heard from students. One, it feels like I have to walk on eggshells around certain relatives, and it's exhausting.
My family has this way of dismissing any mental health challenges I bring up. They say things like, we don't have these problems in our day, and it makes me feel invalidated. So Maya, what are your thoughts on these students' comments?
Well, they're definitely ones I've heard before. So students can take comfort in knowing that they're not alone with these experiences. So whether it may be those shifts in generational and cultural perspectives, being more informed, or other reasons, it seems younger people today are generally more aware of the connection between family dysfunction and mental health. So similar to the previous point about family roles, it can be difficult for people to change if they're really set in ways. Again, whether it's beliefs and values or lack of awareness, some family members may not consider mental health or perhaps perceive it as something to avoid or stigmatize.
Yeah, we see that a lot in international students, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, and so issues within the family are not addressed, and this, of course, builds and causes tensions that are felt in different ways, depending on who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important, too, that students kind of recognize their own feelings in this. They're going into a situation where, yes, there may be some conflict, but knowing and acknowledging their feelings and seeking out maybe some of those supportive environments while you're in the thick of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because we don't have control over the people in our lives.
That is right.
We only have control over ourselves, so yeah.
Exactly.
Next question. What are some signs that students can look out for to recognize when they're being affected by family stress, even if it isn't immediately obvious?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So first sign may be just your response to thoughts about holidays or thinking about the prospect of family time during holidays. So pay attention to the feelings and thoughts that come up, and also the physical sensations and behaviors. As a student mentioned previously in one of those quotes, that feeling of walking on eggshells when you're in the family environment. So feeling fearful of making the wrong move, saying the wrong thing, or perhaps fear of another family member doing so. So anticipating some type of conflict, right? You may not realize it, but being on high alert is keeping your nervous system in a fight, flight, or freeze mode. So this is a function we inherited from our ancient ancestors when most situations were a matter of life and death. So just notice if you have the impulse to leave the situation or become confrontational or shut down. Being in this constant state is really, really hard on our bodies and minds. Notice when you're holding the tension. Be aware of negative thinking and holding back how you're feeling. Family stress can lead to emotional dysregulation, negative physical symptoms, avoidance and isolation, and increased substance use or risky behavior, to name a few. So practical questions you might ask during the holidays that are you noticing? Are you drinking more? Are you smoking more weed if you're doing that? Are you staying in your room for long periods of time or going out and avoiding coming home? Are you starting fights when you don't usually start fights? And noticing an increase in things like stomach aches, headaches, physical symptoms like that.
And all those somatic symptoms just pop right up, right? And I think for myself, when I think about spending time with family, sometimes it just can be that feeling of you're just drained, like all your energy is gone, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Okay, let's think about boundaries now. How can students start setting boundaries with family members who might not understand their own needs and limits?
So the one thing I talk about often with students when we discuss boundaries is that establishing healthy boundaries for yourself isn't selfish. You're taking care of yourself. So setting boundaries means that in many cases, someone may feel hurt, perhaps rejected, and this is not the intention when setting healthy boundaries. So if possible, try to be clear and concise about what you need and stay calm. If you're having the conversation, clearly there's already been some overstepping, right? Mm-hmm. And so in the conversation, past experiences can serve as examples of what felt comfortable for you and what didn't. It may be helpful for the family members to hear these examples. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you can ask about their boundaries, so putting it back on them so that there is this two-way conversation.
Yeah, I really like that because sometimes we get so caught up in ourselves and we want our boundaries kept, but we don't think maybe about others and what their boundaries might be, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would be something someone could say, like we're having a conversation and you feel your boundaries are crossed. What do you think someone could say to, just put a stop to it and go from there?
Yeah, I think something as simple as I'm starting to feel uncomfortable about this conversation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's helpful to start with an I statement. So in that way, it doesn't feel like there's blame. The other person doesn't feel blame. It's like, hey, I'm feeling this way. Let's talk about it. Right. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Or even, I'm starting to feel very frustrated. Can we put this aside for later? Let's just focus on something else right now. Mm-hmm. Right?
All right. So talking about boundaries, sometimes when we're establishing them, there can be pushback. What if family pushbacks is pushing back? What can a student do in those circumstances?
Mm-hmm. This is a hard one. As you were saying, Corinne, we don't have control over other people's reactions, words, and behaviors. I think it's important to say here, if it doesn't feel safe in the moment to exercise your right to reaffirm your boundary, don't push it. Mm-hmm. There are many situations where we recognize it can be fruitless to be assertive and challenge family, and potentially dangerous, just depending on family dynamics. You know your family best and may recognize there are old patterns of self-saving behaviors you actually need to continue in order to get through the holidays.
True.
Mm-hmm. But it can be hard to follow through and stay consistent with boundaries. Again, it's not about you disrupting the peace. In fact, establishing boundaries clearly is proactive in keeping the peace. Boundaries can be tricky because there can be many different contexts to a relationship, and you have to judge when you can be more flexible or firm with them. Remind yourself why the boundaries were established in the first place.
Yeah. I really like your point about maintaining our boundaries is really good, but also recognizing when the things that we've used in the past have kept us safe. I really like that because, sometimes there are people in our lives where they're not going to understand. They're not going to see our viewpoint.
Yeah.
So with families who are pushing back, do you think then it's kind of wise for a student to maybe practice some of this boundary setting before they get home?
Sure.
What would that, what could they do in that instant?
I think rehearsal is a great technique. Mm-hmm. And it's just that. You can write down your thoughts and what you might say. You can write down different responses or reactions and sort of think that through a little bit. And then you can literally stand in front of your mirror and rehearse. Mm-hmm. Or you can bounce it off a friend, a supportive friend.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, a little impromptu, hey, you're my sister today. I want to set a boundary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think with boundaries, that's the key is practicing and prepping, because sometimes it's easier to maintain them when we know what we're going to say, when we know what we're asking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we can get flustered fairly easily, and then the words don't come out or they're relayed in a way that we don't intend. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Or we shut down.
Yeah. So good point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And here's another quote from one of our students.
like holidays can be a hard time for people just because of like certain situations. So I think it's important to, if it really does matter, like you don't have to feel bad about keeping space from people that like cause like harm in your mental state, because just because they're family doesn't mean you need to really spend a lot of time with them if it's harmful.
All right, our next question for you, Maya. How can students handle situations where their family members dismiss or undermine the boundaries they're trying to set? Do you have any tips that can help them reinforce these boundaries?
So if possible, trying to keep open communication and develop skills around this. We were just sort of talking about the rehearsal option. Often when we're presenting what we need, it's not necessarily communicated as such. It may come out in an argument or really passively or through other channels. So first off, determining whether family members are hearing what you need. So important to consider language, tone, and customizing the approach to your audience. Also thinking about, do you have someone in the family environment that can back you up? Be a supportive person. Listen when you need an extra pair of ears, and perhaps make recommendations if they're familiar with the situation. So often students come in and they say, well, I'm dreading this, but I'm really looking forward to seeing this aunt that I only get to see every once in a while because she really seems to understand what I'm going through. Or so if there's someone like that in the environment, connecting with them.
Yeah, it's always good to have that one person there backing you up, especially,
Yeah.
Sometimes, it does take a lot of patience, though, right? We have to sometimes reaffirm our boundaries over and over and over again. So that can be very trying as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned customizing an approach. Do you have any examples of what that could look like?
Yeah.
I picked it up when you said it, because when I've talked with people about boundaries in the past, I've talked with them about communication styles. So like recognizing what their communication style is and the person they're trying to communicate their boundary to. Like if I'm a more reserved, quiet, passive person, I need to plan out what I'm going to say.
Yes.
And if I'm talking to an assertive person or someone who's a little more talkative than I am, I need to figure that out. I need to figure out like what points, even like thinking off the top of my head, like if a person I'm talking to is more about facts and details instead of feelings, I need to incorporate that in, even though I'm a person who really focuses on feelings and like big picture ideas.
Right.
I'm feeling persecuted here, I think.
No. Thinking personal life, Steve. Family. Yeah. Coming from my family experience. But were you thinking like that kind of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it goes back to that point we were talking about of the conversation going both ways and being prepared. Like customizing your approach, knowing how this person has responded in the past or knowing their patterns. And again, using those I statements so they're not taking something as blame.
So for students who are feeling physically and emotionally drained after family gathering, which can happen quite a bit, what are maybe some strategies for that recharging during that limited time that they do have on their vacation?
Right, yeah. I know sometimes a family gathering's like sucking in your stomach while keeping a smile on your face. And when it ends, you can finally release all that tension. So when you have the time afterwards, do what you know relaxes or recharges you. So for many, that may look like spending some alone time, and for others, perhaps meeting up with friends or connecting in some other way. Pay attention to your pets. If you've got pets around, they can be really good therapy. Play video games, go for a walk or a run. Drive around if you have access to that. Do some self-care.
But pretty much anything that you can do for self-care. And I think it's important that we do think about making that, a concerted effort to do, make the time for it. Otherwise, we're just going to feel kind of backed into a corner, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, have that time prepared for after the family gathering. Know that, okay, I'm going to need some downtime and I got to make room for this.
And sometimes that means coming back early and minimizing how much family time we have. Right?
True.
Yeah. Well, and a boundary could be like going for dinner. I'm going to stay for a couple hours, but I know if I stay longer, things get uncomfortable. So I'm going to stay for a couple hours and then I'm going to go. Like that could be a boundary too. Because boundary is not just conversation, it's time, it's finances, it's all sorts of things. So for students who don't have a private space to retreat to, especially in a full house, what are some ways they can still find moments of peace or calm? I know we talked a little about this, but is there anything else you'd add?
Well, even if it's just for a few moments, get away. Find a quiet corner, lock yourself in the bathroom. Just that space to allow yourself to collect thoughts, maybe practice some breathing and grounding yourself in some way. So again, maybe find that relative you can connect to more and ask them how they're doing, what they've been up to refocus your mind. Or you could offer to do a kitchen task. You could offer to run an errand on your own to get out of the house.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think in my family sometimes we have a puzzle table so that those people who don't actually want to socialize, they can go to that quiet spot and just, be alone in that sense, right?
Yeah. I just focus on the whatever dog's around in the space if I don't want to talk to anyone.
And sometimes, a lot of students nowadays have these noise-canceling headphones,
Right.
right? And I think that can be a good technique,
Yes.
especially in a crowded house. I mean, it might seem impersonal, but if you need that space. So, Maya, what would you say to students who feel they're kind of reaching that breaking point and they've got that really intense emotional reaction during the holidays, like they're really ramped up?
Right. I mentioned grounding previously, but developing grounding skills and self-care, which I mentioned as well. So just to go a little more into that, grounding has become a more commonly known term to students, to be fully aware of the present moment, what's around you, and connected to self for that basic stabilization. Grounding focuses on intentional actions such as using senses by looking around, noticing smells, sounds, touching textures that bring you fully into your body. So it's actually the opposite of dissociation. So it's also helpful to recognize when that is happening, the dissociation and why. And perhaps there's times when you're zoning out feels like the safest thing to do. But it can become problematic if it becomes the kind of go-to coping strategy.
Right.
So to be aware of that. And then self-care can be anything you do for yourself that provides relief, relaxation, kindness towards self, as we had discussed. I also talk about anchors that fall under this realm. So conjuring up what feels soothing or good to you, we often say, go to your happy place, kind of that idea. So good memories, people or animals, keeping images on your phone that are helpful to look at and make you feel better. Again, talking to a supportive person, journaling or making artwork to express your thoughts and emotions, movement for your body as an outlet. There's lots of apps specifically designed to help with coping, but to seek immediate help if you're feeling desperate or experiencing suicidal thoughts. You can go to emergency, call 911, call a distress line. If you're able during the holidays, connect with your doctor or a counselor you may be seeing or other professional helpers, or at least book time for the near future.
Yeah, no, that's good ideas, because if you're in a crisis moment, we do have to get those crisis supports in place, whether it is 988 or whether it's, a counselor if they're available and such. Right?
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like, again, just talking about that self-care, and oftentimes I talk to students about a self-care kit. So, I mean, it's just something that they can take with them home for during the holidays and just have it there, and they can look through their kit and look at all these things that bring them joy and pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great idea.
Sometimes that kit can be your cell phone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said,
All
all
you
those
need.
pictures
Yeah,
on the cell phone.
pictures, your music,
Yeah.
your videos.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Your
And for you,
notes, your journaling, your
Pictures
apps.
of your animals
Yes.
and your plants.
Yeah, plants
Right?
that I share with everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. So we want to remind our listeners that reaching out is strength, it's not weakness. So Maya, what advice would you give to students who may feel uncomfortable or hesitant about reaching out for help, especially when it comes to family-related issues?
Yeah, I understand how it may be difficult to consider something like therapy, whether it's because mental health was not acknowledged growing up or the stigma of negative stereotypes, maybe what's been seen in the media, or just that foreignness to talk to someone about how you're feeling. The great thing about wellness services at Lethbridge Polytechnic is that it's extremely accessible for students, offering free counseling to fit with your schedule. In a session, you have the opportunity to ask questions about what the process will look like, your client rights, and how your therapist approaches issues. So maybe you need one session to say what's on your mind, or maybe you decide to continue seeing a therapist to spend time processing family issues or, of course, other issues as well. And just for students to know that confidentiality is important. If you're concerned about information getting back to family members, that is not the case. Our mental health therapists all have standards of practice and ethical guidelines to follow within their registering bodies and are obligated to abide by them. Yeah, if you have more questions about that, come on by to the wellness services.
I'd also like to highlight on our website, we have frequently asked questions piece, which answers a lot of those questions, like what do I expect? What does it look like? What might happen? What is confidentiality? All that stuff. So it's a very big list. So that could be a way maybe to help students understand the process so that it's not so scary.
Yeah, perfect.
And having students kind of reach out to those supports here in Wellness Services would be great, but to reach out before they go home for holidays, to reach out and be able to, talk to somebody at least, and there's almost always somebody to talk to, just to, prepare themselves. And then when they come back to debrief.
Yeah, a reminder that it doesn't always have to be a therapist, right? There's lots of people around here that you can reach out to, but also thinking of the supportive people in your life too. Keep that all in mind.
So as we wrap up today's episode, we want to remind our listeners that family dysfunction during the holidays is really something a lot of people experience. So you're not alone, and there are ways to cope and thrive even through these challenging dynamics.
So we want to thank you so much, Maya, for joining us and sharing your wisdom. Do you have any final thoughts for our students?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And just, a reminder to check in with yourself. Notice what might be helpful and unhelpful in terms of the thoughts you're having, the feelings, your body sensations and behaviors, and what are those signs if things are declining for you. And also remembering boundaries, grounding, self-care, your support network, your coping strategies and resources. And if possible, look for those positive interactions and notice positive thoughts and feelings that might usually get ignored, and practice gratitude when you can.
Awesome. Thank you. To our listeners, remember to take care of yourselves during the holidays. If you found this episode helpful, please share with your friends who might need it too. And don't forget to subscribe and follow Fearless Journeys Thriving on Campus for more episodes.
And remember, dear listeners, you can't control your family dynamics, but you can control how you respond and how you take care of yourself. So this holiday season, protect your peace, protect your mental health first. Take care, stay fearless, and we'll see you on our next episode.